there. All right. All right. So, in honor of this holiday weekend and the fact that we're in the middle of the America 250 celebration, I thought today we'd take a little bit of look at the Parks who were participants in the American Revolution, what we know about them, and what more we could learn, and maybe how we'll go about doing that. So, just to get started, first of all, who were they? Have we identified them all? Well, to some extent, what we already know, and for those of us who are members and have access to the members only pages, if you've created an account, uh, there are 62 pension file abstracts from the Revolutionary War of Park's surnamed individuals. And I took those abstracts years ago and tried to identify and annotate those to whatever extent I could, identifying their lineage keys and where we could, identifying the individuals by their FGS numbers. We call it family group sheet numbers, that identifies them as an individual within that lineage key. So these can be found on the website, as I said, in the members only file. If you click on the research room, there's a drop down menu, choose file share. And at present, this is the only one in the file share. So it has the Parks Revolutionary War pensions there. And you can scroll through and read them and take a look. Just briefly for representation, we've got these lineage keys here represented in those 62 pension file abstracts. You can see over here group 23, which is lineage key S and T, which are two branches of the Robert Park line, which is the line that the Park Society was founded on back in the 60s, as well as a fragment line from that group, lineage key RY. And between those, we have, 19 of those pension file abstracts, but they're a good number down there. My toolbar is blocking it, so I can't really read. But there are other groups that have a healthy representation. But as you'll see, there are 16 that I was not able to identify. And I really haven't gone back and looked at that in a few years. But I think that's an opportunity we can talk about later on. If some of you as members and who love to do research might want to we'll talk about it later, sort of adopt a patriot and see if you can help identify some of those 16 mystery men. So if you're not familiar with the pension files or the abstracts, what kind of information are you likely to find in them? Well, as in the case with other pension files from other wars and military service, it varies from one individual to the next. Some have very little information, some have a wealth of information. But for instance, we'll take just one of the first on the list there. It's a George Parks, two different spellings, who was from the lineage key C, which is Thomas of Virginia, one of the major southern U.S. park lines. And he is third generation, we see, 03C, descendant of Thomas of Virginia. The pension file number there is W27457, which indicates, the W indicates it's a widow's pension file. If it was the soldier himself, it would be an S in front of that. There's also a designation R, which means rejected, and those can be valuable as well, even though they were not able to prove their case to the satisfaction of the pension file board. Those application papers are still there. It doesn't mean that they were fraudulent or trying to make up things. It just means that they couldn't meet that sort of level of proof that the government wanted. So the kinds of information in there, quickly, this service, where they enlisted, when. Sometimes that information is there. when they applied and from where, which again, when you're looking at an individual who may have migrated from one place to the other, it will help you pinpoint them in a certain place in a certain time. Uh, their place and date of birth and uh, where they were born in this case, it gives a very uh, complete date of birth, and that he was born in Amherst County, Virginia. And an interesting bit of additional information that they moved at an early age with his father, I assume the rest of the family, to Rowan County, North Carolina, the part which became Wilkes County, North Carolina. And that's very interesting and consistent with what we know. Uh, we associate parks in Wilkes County, North Carolina, primarily with the Thomas of Virginia line. Uh, but we also tend to associate Rowan County parks with the Roger of New Jersey lineage key K line. Mm-hmm. But this sort of explains that early on, the part that became Wilkes County was Rowan County. But if you weren't aware of all that, or if you're just trying to glean anything to use in your research from that, what that would tell you too is that if you were trying to find records that his father may have created or been involved with in those early years when they moved from Virginia to what was then Rowan County, North Carolina, that you would be wanting to look in Rowan County for those records prior to the date that Wilkes County was formed out of Rowan County. So that's just some of the kind of information that you can take and can inform your research in other areas. Again, a date and place of birth. We see he's in Monroe County, Indiana by 1837 when he died. Because this is a widow's pension, we know his wife's name and her maiden name, Catherine Reed, information on when and where they were married, and when and where she applied for her pension. All valuable information. In addition, it lists their children, and it's very helpful, although we have this information in our database, but if we didn't, it would be extremely helpful in our research that these children are by a first wife who is not named in the pension file, but we have that information in our records. And other information, incidental, James 4C 121, a one-time Indiana state legislator, and looking on down there, there's a son Pleasant, who also served in the Indiana state legislature. Obviously, you might want to go and looking in for information of their service in state legislation, legislator, lature, and one of those words. All of this kind of information can lead you to other stuff. That's the point of all of this. And then we have the remaining children by the second wife, Catherine Reed. Information, here's a married name and the husband's name for one of the daughters, and a date. And this is all in the pension file. In addition, there's other information in this case, very helpful. The soldier's father, who was a John Parks, had 8 sons and 9 daughters, so meaning George, our guy, had 7 brothers and 9 sisters. The only one named was a brother Samuel. We've identified him by his FGS number. And when he was born, which is in this pension file, but he also served in the Revolution, and we refer you to his pension file, which is listed there and is also on that list. Interesting too, again, if we didn't know this information, George and Samuel were the only sons of his father who were not married prior to the start of the Revolution. So if we didn't have firm marriage information for those other children, we know it would be it would at least narrow it down to a time frame prior to the Revolution in 1775 or 76. Just little bits of information that can be helpful if you don't already have access to it. Goes on, Samuel, his brother, had a son, gives his name, uh, and he was and then he also had a nephew, Henry Parks, who was wounded in the Battle of Kings Mountain, and he also had a pension file, which is listed there. Um, Other names were given, but no relation stated in the thing. But some of those are children. Benjamin Parks, who was a clergyman in Monroe County, Indiana, and so forth. So all of this information, and then going on down, a widow's affidavit in Red Oak, Navarro County, Texas. So you can see that the family was moving on, obviously, from Virginia to North Carolina to Indiana, and then on to Texas. So lots and lots of good stuff in some of these. But as we stated, there are only 62 pension files with Park surnamed individuals. Well, that seems like a low number, and it is. If we do a search for our surname on sites such as Fold3, which you may be familiar with, it's all military records. It was in existence prior to being bought by Ancestry, so it's still part of Ancestry.com, but still a separate website, which incidentally, it may be just me, but I find it one of the most difficult websites to navigate. I don't know if anybody else feels the same way, but there's a wealth of information in there on military records for all wars and for many, many different countries. But doing a search for our surname on Fold3, you get somewhere in the range of 11,000 hits. Well, some of those are duplicates. Obviously, it's not each one is an unique individual. Somebody may appear in different types of records. Sometimes they appear in other pension files or records for other non-Parks individuals. They may have signed an affidavit for somebody, and they would be there, in somebody else's pension file. But still, the gap between 62 and 11,000 is huge. So why are there so few pension files? Well, there are a number of explanations, but basically the pension files did not begin for several decades after the end of the war, which ended in 1783. The first pension law was in 1818, and it mainly covered impoverished Continental Line veterans. And then the 1832 Act broadened that eligibility to many who had served at least 6 months in some military forces, including militia services. So you can see a man who was 20 in 1776 was already about 62 when that first pension law came into effect, and 76 in 1832. And obviously, with the lifespan, the average lifespan back then, many of those soldiers who would have qualified for a pension had already died. So that's one of the reasons. Also, again, those early pensions excluded many kinds of service. So the first one, as we said, mainly favored Continental Army veterans, but not every man who served locally or briefly or in state militia units. The National Park Service notes that the 1818 and 1820 Acts were for Continental Army veterans, while the 32 Act opened pensions to militia, and widows were not broadly included until 1836. So again, even if a soldier would have qualified, but he had died, but his widow was still alive, she was not eligible generally to apply for a pension until around 1836, and many of those widows may have passed away prior to that passing of that act. So that already had an effect to winnow down the number of people who were just physically around and able to apply for a pension. And again, the nature of service in the Revolution was different from what we think of in more recent wars, such as World War I or World War II, perhaps even the Civil War, where soldiers were drafted or enlisted and served a longer term, sometimes for the the duration of the army before they were serving until the war ended. But in the revolution, it was generally shorter terms of service. People signed up for a while. Obviously, we know from the history that Washington had trouble at times keeping his army together because the terms of service were up, and many men just simply gave up and went home. Things like that. So it was a very different way of serving, and the militias were sometimes simply called into action when needed, when there was a threat locally, or they served for guard duty, or in state troops, or in sort of non-military but still associated ways with wagon service or even naval and privateer related activity. The U.S. Navy was in its infancy, but there was a good deal of activity by privateers who were either helping smuggle goods into the U.S. or were attacking British ships under, not under the official flag of the United States. So all kinds of different services that could appear in these service records, but they may not have met those federal pension rules at the time, or may have not have thought their service was enough to claim. And of course, a different day and age, they didn't have computers and email and all of the conveniences we do. Applying required effort, and it required proof and access to a court. They had to usually appear in person before a court of record to give sworn testimony about their service. If they were not physically well or able to travel, that would be a problem. They had to be aware of the process. Again, many people may not have even been aware that they could qualify. And they had to be able to supply credible details or witnesses, which could be a problem. A lot of records that they had, discharge papers, you'll see in many of these pension files, and they were lost or destroyed in a house fire at some point. They no longer had those papers that would be necessary, and would often have to resort to affidavits by friends or people who knew them and were familiar with their service. And sometimes that qualified them, and sometimes it wasn't deemed sufficient. And, there were some veterans who did not need or want a pension. That early 1818 Act was need-based. It was supposed to cover those who were in need of a pension. And the later act required them to actually prove and provide information about their property and their income. And there were some people who would bridle at having to provide that kind of information or publicly declare that they were impoverished, or their families might have been embarrassed to have it known that their revolutionary ancestor or relative was financially impoverished. So those could be other reasons why somebody might not apply for a pension. Now, the widow and heir claims, again, are a separate category, and some pension files exist only because a widow or an heir applied later. The soldier may not have applied, and it wasn't until after he died that the widow or an heir applied. But again, if the veteran's widow had died before they were qualified to apply for a pension, or if they had remarried or lacked proof of marriage, then that's another reason why they may not have applied for a pension. Remember, if a widow of a man who would qualify for a pension had remarried, she was not eligible to apply for a pension. If she had not remarried and applied and was receiving a pension, if she were to remarry later, she would lose that pension again. So all kinds of reasons why the the widow might not be able to file a claim. So basically, we have to look at these 62 pension files as sort of a biographical case files, for us. It's not a comprehensive list, but we look at them as a rich genealogical source. But that larger fold three count that we spoke about reflects, this broader universe of service. Actual soldiers, and they certainly served and are counted as patriots. Simply because they didn't receive a pension certainly doesn't disqualify that. So we need to turn our attention to those kinds of records, the non-pension service records, bounty land claims, and incidental mentions, which we'll take a look at one of those in a few minutes. So pension files tell us basically who lived long enough and qualified under those later laws and applied. The service records tell us who may have served. The gap between the two is not a mistake or an error, but it is a research opportunity for us.
Hey.
So where do we find those sources beyond the pension files? Well, we're looking basically at compiled military service records, CMS records, and as we mentioned, they're at Fold 3, which is a paid site. They're also available at NARA, which is the National Archives and Research Records Administration. They're also available on Family Search, which is a free site. They may also, I didn't check specifically, but they may also be on some of the other paid sites, such as Ancestry or some of the others. But certainly those three sources will have them. And remember to be creative in your spelling variants when you're doing searches, because these are old handwritten records and subject to all of the interpretations of handwriting that we struggle with. So try everything. If you're not finding the person you're looking for, try every variation of spelling you can think of, and use wildcards and things like that. So those records are going to give us basic information like the unit, the rank, their muster dates, if they were absent, when they were discharged, that sort of thing. It's not rich genealogical or biographical information, but it does supply information as to their service and when and where they served and how they served. And then, of course, there are the DAR and SAR systems, Daughters of the American Revolution, Sons of the American Revolution, and we'll take a look at those in just a moment. There are other state resources and other places where we can find different kinds of records, militia rolls, payrolls, land bounty records, so forth and so on. Well, we mentioned the bounty land records. Some men received bounty land for their service and never applied for a pension. So you wouldn't find them that way, but they're there as bounty land recipients. You can look in local records, county histories, which we've talked about before, which were published many years later, but may still contain references to a person's service. And of course, probate deeds, court minutes, all of those kinds of records can provide clues as well. Sometimes their service is mentioned on a headstone. So you might come across that on Find a Grave or any other listing of that kind of thing. Actually, we'll talk about it in a minute, but I have a book sitting here on my shelf called Abstracts of Graves of Revolutionary Patriots by Patricia Law Hatcher. Volume 3 are the surnames L through R that contain the Parkes, and it lists all of them that they have discovered and where they are buried, which could be due to obviously other sources. I think I mentioned briefly, the rejected or suspended pension files. You'll find some of those in that file that we have. And again, even if the pension was not approved, there can still be valuable information in those. And apparently, National Archives and Records Administration has a transcription project going, uh, trying to promote pension transcription for America 250. So we come to the DAR. Uh, Here is what their website looks like, where you can see the Revolutionary War records, how to use it, so forth and so on. Uh, and here, likewise, is the SAR website. They have a search system, as the others. Just for fun, I did a search in their database for that same George Parks that we looked at the beginning of this presentation. Uh, as you can see, this is on page 7 of at least 12 uh, pages of Parks named individuals. So looking down there for George, there are 2 of them listed there, both from North Carolina with very different dates of birth and death. Uh, and we are familiar with the first one there who married Catherine Dunlap. But the fellow we're looking for is the second one there. And you can see he was a first sergeant. Again, the dates of birth and death are there. Cemetery State, Indiana, which we know. And this database actually lists both spouses. Uh, so that first marriage was to a Millie Davidson. And then, of course, we know Catherine Reed from that widow's pension file was the second wife. Over on the left, you'll see there's a little Patriot number for each of these individuals, and that's a hot link that you can click on, and it will take you to a page with more information about that individual. Again, repeating some of that information that was on the spreadsheet, but down below there are members who share this ancestor. It can be very helpful when you're following up with research. It tells which child they claim their lineage through. So all kind of valuable information that can lead you to learning more about an individual. Before we go back to this, I mentioned the abstract of graves. There's also a book, and I'm not sure if it's available online. Here's an archive.org address, but I don't know if it actually shows you the pages themselves, but I have a hard copy of it. There was a census taken in 1840 or 1841 of any living Revolutionary War veterans, and it gives you a lot of information about where what state they were living in, and what county within that state they were living in, their age at the time, and the name of the heads of the families that they were found in the 1840 census. So that's, again, valuable information to help you follow up on what happened to them in years past. But again, these are only individuals who lived until at least 1840. They were all going to be up there quite a bit. And there are a number of Park and Parks different spellings in there. So it's worth checking out. So let's take a little pause and go back, since we have several DAR members and who are, stop sharing if I can here. Stop sharing, yeah. So that we can see people's faces. But again, I have very, very little experience with those actual files and how to retrieve them and so forth. But any of you, and hi, Susan, I'm glad you joined us. So any of you, I know, as I said, Susan and Wilma and Deb, I know are all active, and maybe some of you are, others are as well. So feel free to chime in if you want to. Anybody want to sort of describe what kinds of records are there that we may not have access, being non-members, to? Uh,
Well, I can tell you what registrars have access to, and that's everything that there is on the website for DAR. We can't print it, we can't give it to people, we can only look at it. And we're not supposed to even tell people what's there. But I would say that most registrars probably do say that there's a will there that you can go to Anson County, North Carolina, and find the will. But that's the most that we can share because we can lose our access if we do too much. Right now, the DAR website is down today, and it's impossible to show you anything on there because the GRS portion of it is not working today. That's the genealogy research system is not working today.
Now, maybe the traffic was too heavy on
Yeah, it
holiday
must have
weekend.
been, or maybe they had too many fireworks yesterday.
Yeah.
But the public site is not even working today.
Yeah.
So, uh,
Well, the one thing that puzzles me though is I know on Ancestry I have seen some of these applications.
well,
I've
you
seen.
have because somebody has gotten their application because we can give the application to the person it belongs to.
Hmm.
And they've scanned it and put it on Ancestry. And they're
Hmm.
not supposed to do that, but that's the only way that the general public will see it unless you go to the library in person and do the research and go to their, they used to call it the Syme Center, but now that I don't think they even have that anymore. I think it's just one of their computers in the building, and then you can print a copy of it, but you have to be on site in the DAR library to do that. But once you have a copy of your own application, you're not supposed to put it up there, but who's going to tell you, they're going to take you to jail if you do it.
Hmm.
So that's the only way it's going to be up there is that somebody has done it.
So basically, what we members of the public can see when the website is working uh, is these abstracts of the applications, the information that's in them.
Yes, that was what they call the genealogy research system, and it's the what the basic information is on the back of the application, through the Patriot, except for the first three generations, which is myself, my parents,
Hmm.
and my grandparents. That's not shown because there's a chance those people are living,
Yeah.
and they don't show any living people's information. If you went to the library in DC and you got a copy of my application, you would see what was on there. But as far as doing anything from home, you're not going to see it.
Hmm.
Interestingly, my granddaughter's a member of DAR. So you can't see her information or her mother's or
Hmm.
mine, but you can see my mother and my
Hmm.
grandparents, which you can't see on my application, which is just a quirk of the
Yeah.
system.
Huh. Well, it's a handy workaround if you've got the right people.
Yeah. Susan's a member, so and I'm sure she's got lots of input too.
You know, when I joined, our historian really helped me put my application together. I had great aunts who were members, so for me it was a very easy lift to kind of connect myself to them, and then those records have improved it. But to me, I think the thing I've enjoyed most about my DAR experience, my membership, has been the meetings that we have. We have a lot of speaker series that come in on various different topics, and they can be during the day or during the evening. I mean, there's a lot of variety, at least with my chapter. And also, too, I mean, I live very close to DC, and so I've really enjoyed the opportunity, and so can the public. You don't have to be a member, but I love going down to the library and using the resources that are there at DAR. And the library is beautiful, and I go in there, and the next thing you know, it's the end of the day, and I've got to leave. It's sort of like the rabbit hole. Give yourself a couple of days in DC to really explore the library system. And really, anybody can go in. It's not a members only building. So, but that and people say, why are you a member? Well, it's a service organization. There are a lot of other things that go on. For me, I really enjoy the speaker series. And also too, meeting with other people who have an interest in genealogy and family history. And so that to me is sort of what really sparks that membership interest for me.
Yeah, the public website too, dar.org, there's all sorts of tips about researching your revolutionary ancestor on there that you can click through all the different things that look under resources, all the things that they provide. But again, that's part of the GRS, so it's not available today to show you. I think they even have a link to American Ancestors, which has which Susan definitely knows a lot about, and that because they have getting started guides and things like that on how to research your American Revolution ancestors and all different kinds of military type ancestors you might have.
If American Ancestors, for those who may not be familiar, American Ancestors is sort of the public face of it's the New England Historical and Genealogical Society. It's sort of rebranded themselves, but that's who those people are. One of the issues that I did actually a little AI search about because some of you may have experienced this as well. When you do see some of those applications, I have certainly seen some which have what are obvious to me errors in them. Generally, what AI has said that, and I can't remember what the sort of the year break cutoff point was, but some of the earlier applications, the standards for proof were much more lax and well, like any record, but especially for those earlier ones, you really need to take it just as you do any information you find anywhere and confirm it on your own. I mean, I know, and Susan's probably seen this too, Susan Avery, working in North Carolina and the parks in there, some of them are so mixed up. And you know, now that we have a fair amount of DNA representation, we've been able to sort of disprove some of those connections, just saying, no, that can't be right because the DNA doesn't match. You're attaching to the wrong person. I've seen a lot of them. You know, good old Samuel Parks. It's a name that is just all over the place in North Carolina. And, you know, it's like somebody just reached in a hat and pulled out one of the Samuels and attached him to, and a lot of them, some of them, quote, a 1788 will in Orange County, North Carolina. That is one of our genetic, Wilma's and my genetic ancestors and gays. And they've attached them to, as the parents, to people who are not their children. And it's just sitting there. And it's just very frustrating to know that there's not a really good way to correct that other than putting the information out on our own somewhere.
That's why I've wound up researching all of the Parks families. Like I had that George Parks in my database because in order to be able to separate them, you need to know about
right.
And so I just researched them all, and then so I've got a lot of information on the other family.
Yeah. Well, it's the only way. Yeah, it's the only way you can really effectively sort people out because you have to know as much as you can know about everyone. And of course, the DNA helps, but you don't always have that. But still, yeah. So, yeah. I just wanted to raise that because, you know, we sort of hold the DAR and the ASR up, on a pedestal, and they do very good work. And certainly in more recent years, they are much stricter about their level of proof and so forth.
And they're so strict right now that I have a hard time proving anybody
Yeah,
or anybody else, for anybody that I work on.
yeah,
It's not easy because
yeah.
they're so
And
strict now. They
so what
have,
I was gonna say-
they say they use the genealogical proof standard. So you're, what the professional genealogists prescribe that people use. And I believe it because things that I say, oh, that's completely obvious to me, but it's not to the
Yeah.
person that reviews it. And I end up with what they call an error letter. And
Mm.
so,
No, I think also too, Ken, I've seen at least a number of different times on the DAR site where they haven't allowed any additional applications to be submitted. They've disproven the,
yeah.
the certification.
Yeah,
And they just
they redline the Patriot. Nobody can apply on that Patriot.
Mm.
Um,
Which
anyway.
seems strange because they are patriots and they did have descendants, but
The problem's usually that someone's attached themselves to the wrong Joe
right.
Blow Parks or whatever,
Mhm.
and what they had as proof doesn't apply to that particular Patriot number.
Mhm.
So just because that they had their lineage incorrect. Now it could be the same man, but with a correct lineage is still that they'll have a different Patriot number.
Oh, I see. Because I was going to ask about that. It's like, does that mean they're just totally disqualified forever? But they
No.
create a different patriot number, in other words,
Yeah.
with approved proof and that sort of thing. Okay,
And
well, that's good to know.
and you were talking about the earlier applications. Some of them were just basically, well, my great grandpa was in the Revolutionary War. Because those really early members, they might only have 3 generations on there, 3 or 4 generations on their applications. Now we have up to 10 or so generations that you have to prove. And but their standards have increased dramatically in the last few years. So
One of the things that I always found interesting on those applications, though, is taking the information about the member who was applying, which may have been in the 1930s or something like that,
yeah,
and being able to sort of trace and track them and their lineage, knowing that
yes,
they're claiming this ancestry and learning more about them. It
yeah.
gives you a way of finding branches of a family.
Well, I'll tell you that the way I found my lineage, once I found that I had a Patriot ancestor, and I found that with our cousin Gary.
Mhm.
He's the one that discovered that we had a Patriot ancestor. Of course, he had the lineage not quite right, getting to him. But I got the pension documents right away.
Mm.
And that had so much information in that pension that I was able to recreate the family and then follow each line down until I got to where I recognized somebody in that tree as obviously related to me.
Yeah. So yeah, I just think that's an interesting aspect of all of this is that we're not just looking at that revolutionary patriot themselves, but it's giving us information all the way down the line in some ways and allowing us to go off and fill in a lot of branches and things.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah.
that's how we found Jack Parks. Jack that came to the family, we found him that way.
Yeah.
As through the lineage that was created from the pension file. So I think the pension files are a whole lot more valuable than the DAR applications myself. So
It's just there aren't that many of them. But
yeah.
Joanne. Oh, you're muted, Joanne. Yeah.
Okay.
There we go.
I applied a couple years ago and I submitted everything that I had, and they can't find the connection. Do they look at DNA? Does the DAR look at DNA connections? Because I
Yes,
have
they-
been positively connected with this family who served, but I don't have the paperwork.
There is a way to use DNA. It's very complicated and it can only be done a certain way, and they lay that out in on their website how you have to do it. I have never done an application using DNA, so I can't speak from personal experience about it. I just know that it's not easy.
Yeah, I guess
But you can do that if you meet all the little criteria that they have in their way of their method.
okay.
And what couldn't they find?
There's a lot of records in the eastern part of Pennsylvania, but my people moved to the western part of Pennsylvania, which was
Okay.
wilderness, and there was no church, no courthouse.
Yeah,
So there's no records.
okay,
But all of a sudden, there's a person. There's about 3 different lines of mine, but let's say the Parks line. We find them in maybe like the Philadelphia area, but then all of a sudden he's disappeared, but he shows up in Clearfield County.
okay.
And I'm saying it's him, but there's no way of proving it.
There's no way to prove that, yeah, unless there's some document that he created that he mentions both places.
Yeah, the only thing is the but the biography that they did at the turn of the century, which is not proof. There's a lot of errors in those,
yeah.
but it said he was in the Revolutionary War, but they won't accept that.
Have you been able to find any county or state records for sort of, again, if your ancestor had gone to the western part of the state, sort of to, there should be some record of land grants or some type of,
I haven't looked at land grants.
or sales deeds. I'd look at township or
Yeah.
there should have been some governing force for that territory if they were living there. I mean, even it might have been Harrisburg or Philadelphia that was kind of controlling Western PA, but I would start digging into try and find the earliest records for that physical area, and then if you can connect them there, then
How would you find land grants?
Well, I think, the county that they were living in now, I'd call them and say, what are the earliest records for this area? And then I just try tracking backwards. So if your county was started in 1800, okay, who, and your ancestor was there before then I'd ask the county clerk, what county was this area part of? Again, just trying to track it back till you get to a place. It's sort of, New England has been indexed quite heavily but Plymouth County was large in Massachusetts and it altered over time, and same too but just kind of keep tracking that back because that's where you're going to find names. And also too, the county clerk or the county office should be able to tell you where all their real estate or those
And again, as we talked about in the past, go to the research wiki on family search for that area, that county, and see what they have on the page there as to what's available. And don't forget about using full text search once you have an area to hone in on, because that can pull up a lot of those records that you'd never think to look at or look for. So yeah, that's a way to sort of dig into all of that. We can continue this. Certainly, I love it. I just want to run through the last few slides, and then we'll open it back up. So we talked about other sources, where to access records, and I'll put up a resource sheet when I post the recording for this. Certainly. We talked about some incidental mentions in some of these records, and I just wanted to touch on, here's one. This is on fold 3. I noticed there was a record of a Miss Betsy Ann Parks under Revolutionary War Burial Index. Well, that piqued my interest. I mean, why and how is she mentioned in these things? So I took a look, and here's a card for a Robert M. Cunningham. There's his dates of birth and death, 1760 to 1839. He died at age 70. He was a doctor of divinity, born in York County, Pennsylvania. His parentage, the family moved to North Carolina in 1775, where Robert served in the Revolution, though the regiment is now unknown. At the close of the war, he attended school and college, it goes on. He was married 3 times. His first wife was a Miss Elizabeth Moore of South Carolina, and in 1795, he married Miss Betsy Ann Parks of Prince Edward County, Virginia. So that's why she's mentioned. And they had 5 sons. So I did a quick look. Betsy Ann Parks, or Elizabeth Ann Parks, married to Cunningham, is not in our given name index. Prince Edward County, we have, I forget what lineage key it is, but there is a lineage that was in Prince Edward County, and I looked in the lineage catalog for that, and she's not really listed there as well, obviously. But Prince Edward County is adjacent to Amelia County. There's a different line seems to be there. So it's just that incidental mentions like this can lead you to into other roads of inquiry, And obviously here, this one's, it's a mystery. I'd love somebody to get involved and try to figure out who the parents of Betsy Ann Parks are. And that information may be out there online. I haven't followed up on it myself. But again, here's an incident of somebody being mentioned in these military files on Fold 3 that is not a soldier, not directly involved in the revolution, but whose information could open up, information on Parks line that it might be yours, if you're looking in an area, if you're from an area like this. So that's what that incidental mention was all about. And finally, we have to remember that, there were many kinds of patriot service that involved things other than actually just serving in the military. Both men and women rendered service to the revolution in many ways by furnishing supplies of all kinds. I couldn't find them in my files, my wonderful filing system, but I have a couple of vouchers of Samuel Parks in Orange County, who died in 1788, and a son, John, or James, now I can't remember, but both of them being reimbursed for providing food, livestock to the army. You remember the armies had to eat and have clothes and all of this sort of thing. And so this kind of material aid is recognized by the DAR as revolutionary service. So you may come across that sort of qualification for somebody in those records. There are many ways that people who served, in local, county, and colonial offices during the war were also giving service. Women and others enforcing boycotts and non-importation agreements was another way of supporting the revolution. Even though the term boycott, incidentally, is an anachronism when you're speaking of the revolutionary period. The term boycotting came about in the 1880s, late 19th century in Ireland, referring to a Charles Boycott, who was a land agent for absentee landlords and was so nasty and disgusting and vile in his business practices that people started to boycott him. And that's where the term came about. But I digress. Obviously, producing homespun cloth and other goods for uniforms and all sorts of things like that. Camp followers. Sometimes we think of camp followers in the sense of those ladies of ill repute who, for millennia have followed armies around in every war in history. But there were very legitimate reasons for women to follow the army around. The wives of officers often traveled with their husbands, Martha Washington being one of them. But others were there to do cooking and cleaning, sewing and mending uniforms, and of course, nursing the sick and injured, herding, helping herd livestock, things like that, that could free up men for more direct military service. And of course, I think we've all probably read stories of men and women serving as spies, passing intelligence, carrying messages, aiding the cause in that way. And of course, housing troops or refugees, all sorts of ways that people could serve other than actually just picking up a gun and going to war, serving in battle. So we can see the revolution was not won by soldiers alone. It depended on farmers, wives, widows, merchants, ministers, craftsmen, wagoners, committee members, all of these people who supplied, fed, and clothed, financed, and sustained the patriot cause. So we talked about, those 16 pension files that are unidentified. So if somebody, we should sort of organize and adopt a patriot program. And if somebody wants to say, hey, let me see if I can find anything out about this one, we can get in touch and we'll help guide you and maybe talk about where to look and how to look. And basically for the society, what's in it for them? Well, it will expand our Revolutionary War Index, help fill out that pension file, annotated file, use it to cross-work the lineage key and the family group sheet entries. We can add source citations, and this can be put into those early generations in TNG, the Next Generation website that we are in the process of getting up and running. So there's all kinds of benefits for learning more for the society and thus for the membership in general. So we just remember that these men were more than just names on muster rolls. They were part of our shared Parks story. So that's our presentation. Let me stop sharing and we can go back to talking, which I enjoyed. I love the interaction. So, that's basically everything we had, but,
it's Judy Doral from Chicago.
Hi, Judy.
How are you?
Good.
Thanks for all this. This was great. I really enjoyed it. It kind of really dovetails with a lot of what I'm researching right now and I've been working on for a little while now. George Parks happens to be your first patriot.
Yeah.
Happens to be the guy that got me interested in the Parks line.
Okay.
He was my husband's fifth great granduncle. And so I just want to correct one thing you said. He actually did get his pension eventually. He was not totally rejected. He was rejected on the first round.
Oh.
And then had to make a second declaration, and he was awarded his pension then.
Yeah.
So there may have been an R in there somewhere, but he eventually gets it. And I guess I would also, I was also really interested to hear what you all had to say about researching your North Carolina Parks folks, and that you really have to research everyone, all the Parks lines, because that has really just come home to me probably just in the last couple of months, that you can't isolate them. There are too many crossovers in names, and John Parks, George's dad, had 17 kids. They're all named after relatives.
If you ever need any help,
I would love help.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm trying to figure out right now some relationship between some of the Parks that appear to be of a different lineage in Surrey and Wilkes and Burke, and then our Parks of C lineage. And the only question is, and you brought him up, is this dear old Henry Parks, who comes up as the nephew that George brings home from the Battle of Kings Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
He ends up being an Episcopal Methodist minister in Georgia. And the one Parks line that I think is not related to us, all of those folks are Methodist Episcopal, and all of the Parks line that are related to us for sure are Baptists. But there's this one guy that's a crossover between the two that makes me wonder if there's some relationship on some level between those two groups. Maybe just a coincidence, but yes, I would love to talk to you.
And let me just tell you the reason why I was interested in your George Parks and why, it led me to finding out who he actually was a part of is because my North Carolina ancestor's name is George Park.
George Parks. It's Mandy.
And he is listed as a patriot, but just because he donated goods and horses and whatever, he didn't fight, but you could still qualify as a Revolutionary War patriot,
right?
If you gave goods and services and stuff like that. So anyway, so I had to research your George.
Gotcha. Well, I have quite a long annotated pension file. I actually transcribed all of George's pension file and kind of annotated it. So if anybody ever wants to see that, it was one of the first things I did. So it may not be perfect, but it has quite a bit of information, as well as Samuel's. And they had a brother Benjamin who also served, and actually they had a brother John who didn't live long enough to apply for a pension, but pretty positive he served as well. So anyway, that's it. Thank you. This was great.
Well, yeah, great. Well, speaking of George Park here, he's a good example of why we're not just talking about North Carolina, but anywhere in Aberdeen where, genetically some of my Park line and Wilma's and Gay's came from. And George also has roots, deep roots in Aberdeenshire, but we genetically are not related. And so
this George Parks are, the George Parks that you talked about for the Revolutionary War example, has roots in Aberdeen?
No.
Oh, your George Parks.
No.
Gotcha.
Well, our Park line. I'm
gotcha.
Confusing everyone, which I'm good at. But the fact that we found George and he found us, and the DNA has told us more. But it points out that we still have research to do because we haven't sorted out all of those early Park records, baptisms and marriages, as to who's who. And that points out that importance, as we talked about it. You've got to look at everybody in order to figure out whether they're related or not. And we want to do the same in other counties in Ireland and other counties in England and Scotland eventually, because that's the only way we're really going to learn more. We've been spending how many years since the early 60s in the Park Society focused mainly on North America and primarily the United States, and now we've got the opportunity to take it further back, and the way to make that progress is twofold at least, and certainly DNA is a big part of that, but also this sort of what I call meta research, just researching the waterfront in an area and putting people into family groups when you can, and then trying to trace them forward when you can, and get DNA when you can, and eventually, maybe not in our lifetimes, but maybe the next generation down will know a heck of a lot more than we do. But I think that's sort of the direction that we're heading, and I find it exciting and challenging.
Ken,
yeah.
Do you have any clue yet as to which of the Aberdeen parks first got to Armagh in Northern Ireland?
Well, Bill Park, who's very often joins us here,
Right.
his direct line has DNA proof that they're connected to us. And of course, George has his line, which also connects to a descendant who lives in Australia. Her father was from Aberdeenshire.
Right.
So we've got those two sort of anchors now to go. And what we need to do is just gather and collate and assemble all of that early information we can.
Right. Okay.
Put them into family groups when we can, and just start trying to bring it forward.
Right.
So.
Okay. Thanks.
And somewhat to that end, somewhat related, I think it may have been before everybody joined us, but I was saying to Gay early on, I think before my computer left the building, I think down the road in a few months, we've been talking about military records here today. As we noted on Fold 3, there are military records and plenty of other sources, not just Fold 3, but military records for Canada and all of the British Isles countries, even Australia, some of those other places where Parke surname lines emigrated to. And a lot of that information can be gleaned and could help greatly in expanding that research. So we'll focus on sort of the kinds of military records that are available in places other than the United States. I think hopefully that will be
I have one question that kind of relates to that. My ancestor, the father of George, John Parke Jr., fought and died in the French and Indian War in the Virginia 1st Regiment under George Washington, who was his personal friend back from the surveyor days of when the Parke father and son, John and John Jr., were chain bearers for him in Old Frederick County, which became Hampshire County, where they lived. It was now West Virginia. But anyway, so when John Sr. was beheaded by the marauding Indians, I think it enraged his son so much that he joined the Virginia 1st Regiment and then wound up fighting in the Battle of Grant's Hill and losing his life. Where does a patriot like that, it's not technically the Revolutionary War, but it's certainly part of the whole effort, war effort.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and they're not as plentiful, but there certainly are records from those early wars prior to the Revolution. There's certainly records from the War of 1812, there was a project recently to.
Well, it was actually finding those records and piecing all that together. I actually, no one had ever said it to my knowledge before. Mm-hmm. I kind of found pieces and then put it all together.
Yeah. Well, at some point too, that would be a good project for us to extract all the Parke references in those even earlier records and see if we can identify them as well. Yeah. But
the DAR doesn't include them, French and Indian War, or
that I can't answer, but
you're muted. DAR has a limited range of dates. I can't remember the start dates. I think 1775 until 1783. I think.
Yeah, I think that range. Sounds right. Yeah.
Okay.
No, but we talked about records in other countries. I have seen, just in what little research I've been doing, references to pensioners who served in the Napoleonic Wars in England, which were the early 1800s. So that stuff's out there, and it's just waiting for us to discover it all. Well, this has been great, and again, I thank you all, because this, being a holiday weekend, I know everybody has lots of probably have unspent fireworks to go and light or something, or whatever. But
what happened to the fireworks in Washington?
well, and not only that, but apparently they caught the Brooklyn Bridge on fire.
Oh my God. The
So,
whole lot's been a disaster, hasn't it?
I'm not a huge fan of fireworks, but ours were limited and they were over by 10:30 last night. So
In Miami, we had drones. No
Oh,
fireworks.
that's good. I think that's really clever.
It was pretty nice, but it was drones.
yeah.
I don't know.
Drones.
There's a lot to say for fireworks. I really would like to see fireworks on occasion.
The Chinese are brilliant at their drone displays, though, aren't they? The Chinese, they're fantastic.
Yeah.
We had natural fireworks last night. We had a lightning storm right at dark. So there was no fireworks in our neighborhood at all, other than lightning.
I hope you haven't regarded me as a spy in this meeting.
I don't know if anybody can see the chat, but Larry Peck here has popped up with and pointed out there's the Order of the Indian War of the United States. So would qualify. Do you mean it would qualify for DAR membership?
The pension, maybe.
There's
they have their own society.
a group of, I'm not sure what the name of it is, but it's Old Wars or Indian Wars or something like that. Descendants. And I'm not sure if it's the later Indian Wars that were fought or that original or the French and Indian War. I just don't know, but I'm sure there's a group for everything.
Right. Something for everyone.
Yeah, something for everyone.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you all. This has been great discussion. And
Hey, Ken?
Yeah.
Just a quick one. Folk 3 Revolutionary Records are free until tomorrow.
Oh.
Access is free until tomorrow.
This is on Full 3?
Full 3, yes.
Okay.
Revolutionary Records are free until tomorrow.
As soon as you leave here, everybody rush to Full 3.
No rush, no pressure.
Don't crash the website like they did the DAR. Okay, well, again, good to see you all, and we'll see you next month with a brand new show.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Have a good one.
Everybody.
Bye.
Bye.